It's a well-known fact that humans don't really do well with change. Think about your own life. How many times have you gone through changes and it's just been really, really tough? But the one thing, but there's something that's also really good about change is that it's temporary. I mentioned in my first video about the transition, like you're moving towards something. You're going to get there at some point. And even if you don't get to exactly where you thought you would get, the change does, I guess, end in a way. But you might be like me, and there's this constant change. That's how I feel. Like, I feel like I'm just going from one change to the next, which is why I had to reframe my language and start calling them evolutions. No, elevation? Oh, both. Because I'm like, it seems like in a constant transition, like one thing to the next. Now, some of it I have brought on myself. So that's the other thing I think about transition is it can be voluntary and involuntary. And it's how we respond to it. So, hey, I am Dawn Butler, and I'm going to be your change navigation coach because I have gone through a lot of changes and transitions in my life, some voluntary, some involuntary. I've mentioned before that I've been divorced twice. They were sort of voluntary and involuntary together. I've had to go through the healing or not so quite healing. Each situation was different. I've made decisions to move myself across countries, across states, because I thought that was what I wanted to do next. So I've done the voluntary transition and the involuntary transition. And I'm in a transition even now. I am figuring out, and I've sort of had this inkling that I was headed toward this transition for a couple of years now. And I'm now at the point where the transition has been triggered or yeah, triggered is a good word by the fact that I was recently laid off. And so now I'm trying to figure out, ooh, what am I gonna do with this transition? Like, do I switch up some things, change my life? Like, it's literally an opportunity, really, to make a change that could be for good. But going through the transition, right? Going through the uncertainty, the unknowns, like figuring out like what kind of calculated risks I can take, things like that is the tough part. Honestly, it's the tough part. Even if you have a voluntary transition where you decide you want to make a change, the process and the things you have to do to prepare yourself for that change and then going through the change can bring unexpected things. And one thing that I wanted to drop in your ear to think about when you're in the transition, voluntary or involuntary, if you're like me, and like many people, you try to get as much information as you can, right? And also, you're looking toward an expected end. And so now that I said those words, I want to reassure you that God has plans for you, plans for an expected end. Now, there at times can be a challenge where we're not sure like what that end looks like. That's the involuntary transition stuff. Again, but even with voluntary ones, you think you know what it's going to look like, but it may not turn out that way because you're only in control of so many things in your life. And if you're a control freak like me, you're trying to control as much of it as possible because you want it to be a certain way when you get to your destination. But again, it doesn't always look that way. But I wanted to drop a little tidbit in your ear with this video. You're in analysis paralysis. You're not sure which route to take. There's sometimes, a friend of mine said to me the other day, maybe the challenge with us today is that we have too many options. And I was just like, hmm, excellent point. Maybe that's a part of it. If you had less options, you wouldn't have as much analysis paralysis, as much waffling back and forth. But either way, something that I've found that's helped me during this transition time, the time of figuring out where I want to go, who I want to be, and things like that is taking action. And once you've taken the action, right? The actions I'm talking about are the ones that you believe that will get you toward the place where you want to be, your destination, even if you're not sure what that is. But for me, I have a general sense of what that is, but I just don't have the complete picture. And so it can seem a little murky, like, am I taking the right steps? But there's this mental model I learned about, and I haven't learned about it in detail. I just was, when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is my aha moment, and I want to share that with you. It's called the Cynefin model, Cynefin, and that's N as in Nancy on both cases. And it's like a four quadrant thing. And maybe when I do the video, when I edit this video, I'll drop a picture of it in there for you so you can see what I'm talking about. But in one of the quadrants, it says that when you have a lot of uncertainty, which is what you have in transition, a lot of unknowns, that's what you have in transition, and it seems chaotic, you take quick action. And I was just like, oh, right. Now, granted, I'm one of those people that learn like after the fact. Like I just do, and then I'm like, oh, yeah, that was a good idea. So I had been taking action, but when I saw that, I was like, right. So whenever you start to feel like debilitated or like, oh, I'm not sure or whatever, because I get that a lot nowadays, and I normally do. I used to be a very decision or like quick decision oriented person, but these days, maybe as you get older, there's more at stake somehow. And there is. It just seems to be more at stake. It's a little harder to make those quick decisions and take like risky actions. Um, and maybe it is the fact that there is a lot of information out there. And it's just hard to make decisions because there's so much information and so many options out there. In any case, taking small action matters. And the other thing that I've been telling myself and I want to share with you is believing that every action I take will work for my good. It will work for your good. You may not see it now, you may not know, but if you're trusting yourself, you're trusting God, you're trusting your intuition, and you have done some research, you have done some investigation, you have asked some questions, take the action and then release it and let it go. If, try your best to do that. And don't like, look, I literally wrote this down. Like, I need to not spaz out over every single decision or action I take. Like, come on, you got to let it go. You got to release it. Because the truth is, if you don't take the actions, you're not gonna progress and move forward. You'll just stay in the murk and the chaos of the transition. Sometimes when you take an action, it leads you to an answer. It leads you to a connection, a person, or something like that. So I hope today that if you're feeling this way, you feel a little lost or a little stuck or whatever it might be, that you would find a way to find some space for yourself in prayer, in meditation, whatever that is for you, that you can get some clarity. I'm not talking whole picture clarity here. I'm not. I'm talking like partial clarity. Like even if you can just remind yourself where you started and where you thought you were going, whatever that might be. And then maybe there's some action that you wanted to take and you just didn't. And now you're like, you know what? Let me just try it, see what happens. And y'all, I am speaking to you and I'm speaking to me. And even this video is a small action that I am taking to a unclear and uncertain future, a future that I dream of, if I'm honest. People have been asking me these days, like, what do you really want to do, Dawn? What do you love? And I like talking too. I'm an introvert, but I've always been talkative. I was always the kid on my report card in school, in elementary school. The teacher would say, Dawn is a good student, but she talks too much. I like to talk. So I can sit here and talk to this computer and think I'm talking to you, or I can talk to someone else, which is what I do on my podcast. And, maybe that's my future. Only God knows. But if I don't take these steps and these actions, toward that, I used to think magically sometime something would happen. But we live in this uh system. And I don't mean like racism and institutionalism and colonialism. I mean the world, the way the world is made, like the way God designed it. And it's called and they're in the seed, planting a seed, having time for it to oh geez, I forget it on my gardening language, to gestate, which is actually a word for babies, but you know what I mean, to get planted and to nurture and to grow and then have a harvest. That's just the cycles we live in. So if I want a future of talking to people and speaking and sharing about my life and my story and helping people through that, I got to start planting some seeds. And here's one. So thank you so much for listening. I hope that you would find a way to take some small action that's toward your future and don't spaz out and worry about it. Just believe that it will work and that you're planting a seed and that then you trust that seed to the Lord of the harvest, that He will bring that exponential growth, that exceeding abundant above all that you or I can ever ask or think. I pray that for you today. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.